Hi everybody, thank you for joining me today. My name is Delroy. I'm joined today by Kim Golding. Shortly we're going to be having a discussion primarily for practitioners like yourself to offer support around some of the barriers that you may come across, or to help you address some of the uncomfortable feelings that you may experience when serving members of the community that are from ethnic minority groups. So in our conversation, we will be discussing issues about race, culture, and diversity, and the implications that this brings into your consultancy or brings into your therapy room, and how best to approach these barriers or topics or subjects. So before we start the discussion with Kim, I just wanted to read to you a brief paragraph from a book that I'm reading called Me and My White Supremacy. The word fragile is so apt, as it describes an inability to withhold even the slightest pressure. Conversations around race and white supremacy are by their very nature uncomfortable. They come loaded with historical and present-day events and experiences that have caused pain, shame, and inequality. White fragility prevents you from having a conversation about racism without falling apart. If you cannot talk about racism, especially about the ways in which you have been unintentionally complicit in racism, then you will never be able to go beyond the mere superficial understanding of racism. I thought that was a really good paragraph because it touches upon some key points for me. I think the wording unintentionally complicit in racism is something that happens a lot in institutional, large and small institutional groups. Minorities do get caught up in unintentional racism, which is perpetuated by the people that are in the establishment. And the conundrum there is that they didn't make this establishment or make the rules, they probably just work within it. So then you get this barrier straight away that comes up where they don't want to address the issues of race and all the other stuff that comes with it. So that's probably what, or should I say, where we find ourselves in the therapeutic world as well, because it isn't something that's probably openly addressed. It tends to be the elephant in the room a lot of the times.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose as you were talking, I'm reminded of that story you told at the study day about going to the school.
Yeah.
And, that lady, I would imagine unconsciously racist. I wouldn't imagine that was thought through at all. I don't know if is it worth recounting the story?
Yeah, sure. I think that would be a really good story for everybody to hear, actually. I work for a fostering agency. Part of the support that we offer, along with the therapeutic support, is practical hands-on one-to-one support with the young people. Sometimes this entails collecting children from school, if that helps it, the foster carers, if they've got a busy schedule. Now, on this particular occasion, the foster carer had training at our head office. The training was over 2 days, Thursday and Friday. So my colleague, Alice, was asked if she could collect the children on Thursday, and I was asked to do the same on Friday. Now, there were 4 siblings, 2 boys, 2 girls. So I collected the 2 younger boys first. Then it was a short drive, about a mile or 2, to go and collect the 2 elder female girl siblings. So I got to the school. The 2 boys came out with me. We walked to the front gate. Teachers came out with the first sibling and introduced himself, says, "You're Delroy, we are expecting you." The second sibling was at reception because she needed to pick up some work. So I said, "They are expecting you at reception." So the 3 siblings in total, we've all walked round, got to reception. The receptionist has opened the front door and asked who I was. I explained I'm Delroy from Children's Always First. I've come to collect the child who's there waiting. Do you have any ID? I do have ID. It's my mistake. I've left my wallet in the car. Do you need me to go and get it? She said, yes, please. And that's absolutely fine. Before I could say any more, she'd taken the 3 children in and locked the door. Now, bearing in mind, 2 of those children don't even go to that school, but she was totally comfortable with taking them off me. I walked to my car, only took a minute, got my wallet, came back. She's opened the door, taken my ID off me and locked the door again. So now I'm waiting outside and all 4 children are inside. And again, 2 of them don't even belong to that school, but they're all inside. Then she's gone and made a phone call. Then she's made another phone call. The whole process lasted between probably 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes. And then she's come back and said, okay, I've verified who you are, and then handed my ID back to me and then let the children out. I've put my ID in my wallet and we're walking back to the car, thinking, and now this is the really poignant part of the story. The child who was waiting inside turned to me and said, Delroy, why did she ask you for your ID? She didn't ask Alice for her ID when she came and Alice picked us up yesterday. And she didn't ask Alice any questions either. She didn't get on the phone and phone anybody and ask who Alice was. She just let us go. So why did she do that to you? And it was a really powerful moment. I was kind of, my heart was filled with so much joy. I wanted to pick the child up and run around the car park and say, yes, you get it, you understand. But it just really went to show how a child could quite easily identify the difference in how I'd been treated. And she was visibly upset by this as well. I could see the anger in her face. She could see that an injustice had been done. So yeah, it was a really, in the 10, 11 years I've been working with young people, probably easily one of the things that I probably will always remember.
Yeah. When you told us that story, I was so moved by it and so shocked by it as well. And think, you know, it was lucky that that child had a relationship with you where she could test that out with you and say, what was that about? Because otherwise the impression she'd be left with, black man, dangerous, wouldn't she? You know, it's just, and I suppose as I kind of reflected on it afterwards, and I was trying to think, if I'd been that lady, I could see myself having done the same thing. That's what was really, I think, part of the shock was I could have done that completely unintentionally because I hold these biases. And it's so, I guess it worries me that it's so easy to step into that sort of, I suppose it's unconscious racism, isn't it? Would that be the term you'd use for it?
Yeah, it's unconscious bias, and it can be unintentional. The good thing, when it's unconscious and unintentional, you can approach it from a position of innocence. So you're not being too heavy-handed or judgmental of the person because it was unintentional, and they may not be aware of their behaviours because you're bombarded by society with all these subliminal messages that being white makes you better, or is the preferred colour that makes you less threatening, more compliant, less aggressive, not having a capacity for violence or criminal activity, whereas being a minority, something different, puts you in makes you get treated quite differently.
Yeah, definitely. And being brought up, you know, I suppose I was thinking, if I treated you that way and you come to me and said, Kim, I just need to reflect this back to you, I just wondered what my response would be, because I could imagine, again, without meaning to, becoming quite defensive. You know, I pride myself on my, I don't even know what words to use, because you know, I pride myself on seeing everyone as equal. I value, that's a value I hold. And yet I know within me, I have a bias not to see everyone as equal.
Yeah.
And it's a really hard minefield to navigate through.
Yeah. I think it's a very natural response when you feel uncomfortable to become defensive, and it's training your brain to come out of that that phase, that defensive trigger, which it is possible, but it does take a conscious effort for you to do that. And the first step is identifying the biases that you hold. If you don't have that conversation with somebody, or even just with yourself, and kind of acknowledge that you do have these biases, that's the only way that you're ever going to prevent yourself falling into that trap in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and thinking of myself as a psychologist and a therapist, and how easy it is, I'm sure, for my biases to come out in my work with people from different cultures to my own. And, you know, wondering whether, because you've got the power differential you know, how easy would it be for a client to turn around and say, Kim, did you realize what you just did? Did you realize what you just said? You know, I should think it would be really hard to do that.
Yeah. And I suppose when you're in that therapeutic environment as well, like you say, the power is all mainly on your side as the therapist. And I suppose the person that is in the session is very consciously aware of the dynamics of that, and it's something that's represented through the whole of their life when they're young in school, and then when they go to work, it's something that translates from childhood into adulthood, and then when they go into the therapeutic environment, they're going to carry all of that with them. So it's going to be very difficult for you, I suppose, to find that balance where you can get them to open up.
Do you think, is it a helpful thing to be explicit about this at the beginning of the relationship? I mean, if you came to me as client and I was your therapist, for me to say, Delroy, I really want to be open to you, and I really want you to let me know if there are times where unconscious bias comes through. Would that be something you'd feel comfortable with me saying at the beginning? Imagine that you didn't know me, beginning of a relationship.
I think it would make a huge difference if I didn't know you at all and it was the very first session. Because of the example that I gave you of me when I was collecting the children, that is something that's happened numerous times just in that one role. So throughout my life, that's happened again countless times. So you can have this perception that is how you're going to be treated by most people. So then when I come to a therapeutic setting, if you from the get-go acknowledge that this is something that happens, it then gives me an awareness that, okay, at least you've done some kind of research and you know a little bit about the barriers or the way that I've been treated. I think that would be a good footing or a good way of breaking the ice to let the person know that you understand. You don't know everything, and I wouldn't expect you to know everything, but the fact that you've made some effort, that would go a long way for me to kind of be an icebreaker, definitely.
Oh, that's really good to know, because it would, I guess, I mean, I've shared a little bit with you about my cultural heritage and how being brought up in a Jewish culture, no, not being brought up in a Jewish culture, but a Jewish family, but coming and assimilating into British culture, and how, as I've been reflecting more on this, I've come to realize much more that my socialization was around not acknowledging difference.
Okay.
And I think it, you know, a family that has assimilated, you know, we even changed our very Jewish surname from Goldstein to Golding. And, you know, I shared with you, my uncles were all given very English names. Jewishness was really hidden, which is understandable given where they come from and the persecution. But the impact on me being, so my grandparents moved into England. So my father and his brothers were born here. so that makes me what, second generation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then obviously, and I hadn't realised really until we've been exploring this within the DDP community, and really kind of facing up to some of these issues that I've kind of ignored most of my life. And I kind of came to realise that I've been socialised to ignore them, because you don't show that you're Jewish. You show you're British, you're English, that's what you've got.
Yeah.
And although I grew up, very, with strong values around equality, but those strong values were played out in terms of, so don't notice difference. I remember a poem I wrote as a teenager, when you're struggling for identity and who am I and what are my values in life. It was a horrendous poem, I'm sure, very insensitive.
I'm sure it wasn't.
But it was about race. And I remember, writing about, some awful phrase like, it's only your skin that's different colour, I think my white supremacy came through, I'm sure. I wouldn't even want to go back and read it now, but I was really struggling to try and make sense of, and particularly to make sense of the racism within my family, because they were rampantly racist. It was like, we're the in-group now, so we've got to keep the out-group out. And that was all around Pakistani people, because there were a lot of Pakistani people coming into where we lived, where I grew up. And so they were the, and I couldn't get it, Delroy. I really couldn't. I couldn't understand how my father and his family had been welcomed into this country to escape this awful persecution. They'd had a good life because of this. They'd all, self-made. So why would they not want to embrace that for another culture? And this is a really long way round to say. So what I've kind of come to realise is that it was, you've got to not notice your difference within your family. Now so long way round to thinking about myself as a psychologist and as a therapist working in a multicultural world. I don't know. I try not to notice difference. When I first met you, I would have made no attempt to recognise that we had different cultural heritages, because for me, it's about my not being racist meant I don't notice it. And what you're teaching me so beautifully is we have to notice it.
Definitely.
And that will really change my practice.
Yeah.
Because now when I meet some, maybe, the future you, whoever it is, I'll be uncomfortable, but I'll hopefully feel more confident to say, hey, there's a difference here. Shall we talk about it? Shall we think about it? I want to invite you to notice any reactions to you that make you feel uncomfortable, because I have biases that I'm not even aware of. Yeah. And I'm going to be anxious doing that, because it's so against everything I've been socialised to do. Does that make sense?
It's such a big pitfall that so many people fall into. Let's not mention that he's different. Don't mention that he's black. Don't mention that he comes from Jamaica. Different is what makes the world such an interesting place. Just embrace the difference. You're not recognising that I'm different. You're not recognising that I am an individual. What you've spoke about and what I've spoke about, what our parents did, we try to fit in to hide that individualism when it really needs to be embraced, because that's what builds your self-worth and your idea of who you are and sense of where you want to be in life all comes from your identity. So it's something that really needs to be embraced, and sharing the differences that we have is a really enriching part of your own self-development.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I can't believe I've got to this age, my vast age, really confronting this for myself. And so grateful to the DDP community for pushing me to do this. I know clinical training, we probably did a bit of tokenism, I want to say, thinking about differences in race and also in sexuality and and class,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been really an interesting journey, kind of facing it in myself, really. Yeah.
So in a therapy setting, how would a therapist approach like transracial adoption if there was the parent was black and the child was white, or vice versa? Generally, would that be one of those situations where you'd be kind of worried of what to say or how to say it?
The old me definitely would be reluctant if it was brought to me to, if the maybe it's adopters, you said, didn't you? If the adopter said,
or foster even.
No, I've kind of worked with both. I will, if they brought it to me, I'd be happy to discuss it, but I think raising it would be where I'd be a bit more uncomfortable.
Well,
but I'm thinking of
even if it was an obvious flag, would you still be hesitant?
You're challenging me now. I'm wondering. Maybe if I was doing a consultation. And maybe it was. Maybe because it was such an obvious topic to talk about, I probably would feel comfortable talking about it. Yeah. So how are we going to think about your daughter, your son's culture, heritage? How is that going to fit with your culture and heritage? Yeah, it probably would have been so. Yeah, I can think of consultations where that has been discussed.
Okay.
Really trying to, I suppose, encourage thought about maintaining cultural identity and heritage. Yeah, I suppose you're making me think of a little Chinese girl that I worked with, an adoptive family who'd adopted her from China. And I remember having conversations about when's the right time to go to China, for example, and to take this. I mean, the little girl was only wee at the time, but only little. But when would be the right time to take her back and show her origins?
Okay.
I remember having conversations about that, and the sadness for her was she was a foundling baby, so there would be no tracking of family. There was no one knew who her family were, and that and I remember us talking about that and how to help this little girl make sense of that as she grew up. So I can remember feeling quite comfortable talking about those issues. Is that the sort of thing you were thinking about, or?
I suppose it's kind of feeling comfortable enough to ask the question. It's probably the most difficult part, I imagine, is going to be the first question of have you thought about your race and the child's race and how that impacts on the way that you parent them or you perceive that they should be parented, or if you have a child and they go out into the world, are you preparing them for some of the racism that they may come across? And when they come home and they're frustrated by that, is there acceptance and understanding of the issues that the child might be going through?
Yeah, that's really important, and I'm not sure I would have thought to talk about the racism they might encounter. I think probably my thoughts, and again, this is where my awareness needs to be raised, because of course I've grown up not to encounter racism. So it's not something I immediately think of as a white person. And so it's really helpful to be thinking about that and to thinking about that's something to actually actively think about. You're going to take your child to school. There's going to be an obvious difference when you're standing at the playground. The kids are going to notice, and kids can be very cruel. And let's think. So it's thinking about discussing these issues early, isn't it, and being prepared for them.
Yeah, most definitely.
I guess one of, as a, white female, British born and raised, there's areas of discomfort around saying the wrong thing, being insensitive. I suppose there are two areas that I really worry about. One is, which I'm sure I share with a lot of people, just, I'm going to get this wrong. I'm going to be clumsy. I'm going to say something wrong. I want to ask you about your heritage, but I'm worried in asking you, am I going to inadvertently offend you?
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So there's that area which I think holds me back.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think the other area that holds me back is a fear of tokenism.
Mm,
I know when I'm writing, you know, and obviously I want to be culturally sensitive within my writing, but
mm,
sometimes you just feel, am I just being tokenistic about this?
yeah,
You know, give a couple of children different sounding names and that's me done, you know.
yeah,
And how do you authentically embrace other cultures in your writing?
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, and I think, you know, sometimes I kind of just don't do it because I think, well, if I'm going to do that, it's just going to be tokenistic, and that's more insulting,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know. So
yeah. I think if my advice to that would be if you have a client, just even a little bit of research into the main aspects of their culture. I
yeah,
always remember there was a conversation in a previous role that I had when this white gentleman asked me about my name. So my surname's Madden, which is Irish, and he
right.
said to me, "Oh, that surname's Irish. How did you end up with an Irish surname?" And I just thought to myself, do I be sarcastic or do I bite my tongue? Because there was
Yeah,
a thing that happened 500 years ago, like slavery, and we were
yeah.
given names of our slave master, and I think things like that are very obvious.
But if you haven't done your research, if
Yes,
if you've never looked into slave culture, for example,
yeah, yeah,
you, and I guess that's the scary thing, isn't it? And you're right. You know, it's a really good advice to me to do my research before, you know, before I'm working with those clients, those families. If you haven't done, but that, you know, my worry is, what if I don't know the bit of information I should know, to
yeah,
not ask the stupid question?
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I might, you know, if I didn't understand about slavery and surnames, I might well say, hey, how did you get that name? And
mm,
then I realize I've offended you
mm,
because I've shown that I am not interested in your cultural heritage,
mm,
perhaps.
mm.
And then so, you know, this is where it feels like a
Yeah,
minefield.
I'm
I might get it
mindful. Yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
Interestingly, when I first went to Australia, now this will interest you. You know, I was preparing for my first trip to Australia. I thought I must learn about the Aboriginal culture. You know, I'm guessing there'll be Aboriginal and or Indigenous population. Sorry, let me put that differently. I'm guessing there'll be Indigenous foster carers coming into my trainings and
yeah,
things, and I need to know about that culture. So I got a couple of books, and I remember on the plane going over, I was reading them, jetting up, and it suddenly occurred to me, I have never done this for the cultures that I live and breathe and work with side by side in my own country.
okay, wow.
Why have I got to go to the other side of the world
So,
to realize that this is what I've got to do,
mm,
where I've grown up, you know, alongside
these
a
different,
whole range of different cultures, Afro-Caribbean, Muslim, you know, Pakistani, Indian, you know, and I have not ever thought, I really need to understand these cultures.
yeah, yeah,
When I'm going to Australia, I did. So how do you make sense of that?
yeah,
We're frail, aren't we,
yeah,
humans? Yeah, we have our frailties.
definitely.
Yeah.
I
So
suppose,
that's really good advice. I really like that idea of, you know, do your research before you start working with these families.
definitely. Thank you, Kim, for those excellent points that we've been able to discuss over the last half an hour. I think we've given everybody lots of food for thought, so I think we'll pause there so that people can reflect over the conversation and all the good points that we've been through. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and we'll try and answer and support anybody in any which way that I can. We will be revisiting this, and there will be a part 2 of this video discussion where we will be exploring further some more points that were raised today. Also, we will be discussing issues around parental differences in different cultures and how to address that. Religious differences as well, and how you can safely address those differences. Also, we will be giving you pointers on how to ask questions about somebody's race, about somebody's culture, and about their heritage, and do that in a safe way. So please look out for that next video, and thank you for listening. Bye for now.